Mr. Speaker, I rise again today, as I've been doing every week, to sound the alarm on the crisis of poverty in America. 12 members of Congress are or will be participating in the Food Stamp Challenge, which is a nationwide effort to bring attention to the needs of the 45 million Americans who are receiving food benefits under the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or food stamps. For 1 week, we lived on the food budget of the average food stamp recipient, or $31.50 a week, $4.50 a day, which means I spent on average $1.50 a meal. This is for 1 week. Let me thank Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Tim Ryan, Joe Courtney, Jan Schakowsky, Donna Christensen, Alcee Hastings, Keith Ellison, Jim Moran, Jackie Spear, Ted Deutsch, Marcia Fudge, and Eleanor Holmes Norton for their participation and their commitment to drawing attention to the struggle of millions of hardworking families to put food on the table during very difficult economic times. We face limited food choices, lacked access to fresh and healthy foods, and were repeatedly exposed to unhealthy and inadequate food choices that promote poor health and obesity and hypertension. But of course, our week will end. I hope that every member of Congress will stop for at least a moment and consider the millions of American families who will face these challenges each and every day until they can find a good job with a real living wage. Now, I'm a former food stamp recipient, and let me tell you that I was deeply thankful for my fellow Americans who were there for me and my children during a difficult time in our lives. The benefits that were extended to us were a critical help and provided a vital bridge over troubled waters when we needed them the most. But we didn't want to stay on food stamps forever, and we got off as soon as we could. Let me also say that now is not the time to gut these critical human needs programs. We are facing record poverty levels and unacceptably high unemployment rates, and it is simply unconscionable to attempt to balance the budgets on the back of the most vulnerable and the neediest Americans. We must create what is being called a circle of protection around these core programs that keep American families from suffering the worst impacts of living in poverty. But we must do more than just minimize the cuts to programs. We must make bold, targeted investments that will lift those families up and off of food stamps. We must improve and extend programs that create jobs and provide ladders of opportunity for all. We must commit ourselves to removing barriers, and there are many, to opportunity like poverty and hunger, so that we can reignite the American dream. Mr. Speaker, on January in 2008, the House unanimously passed a resolution that I authored, which committed Congress to the goal of cutting poverty in America in half in a decade. Now it's time to put that commitment to the test. An estimated 46 million Americans were living in poverty in 2010, and according to the latest census figure, the official poverty rate in 2010 now is 15.1%. It's simply unconscionable that the richest and most powerful nation in the world can allow so many of their fellow Americans to fall to the wayside and be left with little hope and few opportunities to reach their American dream. It's clear that our policies and programs addressing poverty have not kept pace with the growing needs of millions of Americans. It's time we make the commitment to confront poverty head-on, create pathways out of poverty, and provide opportunities for all. I've introduced H.R. 3300, the half in 10 of 2011. This bill would establish a federal interagency working group on reducing poverty. The working group will be tasked with developing and implementing a national plan to reduce poverty in half in 10 years. We really should be talking about eliminating poverty. They would also work to eliminate child poverty, extreme poverty, and finally put an end to the historic and ongoing disparity in poverty rates in communities of color. It's simply unacceptable that communities of color continue to face disturbingly high rates of poverty, with 27.4% African Americans, 26.5% of Hispanics living in poverty when compared to their white counterparts who have a poverty rate of just under 10%. It's time to work together to dramatically improve access to opportunity for low-income Americans so that they can climb up the economic ladder and reignite the fire of the American dream. We must put partisanship aside to preserve and extend the vital human needs programs that protect our most vulnerable communities. We cannot and we must not seek to balance the budget on the backs of the Americans' poor, her children, and an entire generation of young people who are really now taken to the streets to protest the fact that they are afraid that theirs will be the first generation in American history to be less well off than the one before.